Oh, that's a real deep question. There's been days where you're kicking buckets out the door. You're
Oh
like,
yeah.
that's it, I'm done.
You walk by the shop and you see like a Home Depot orange bucket go flying out the door.
Yeah.
Fuck! Yeah, there are those
Yeah, so
days.
that would be one of those days where you're not feeling it. It's
Yeah.
just better off to turn off the lights and come back later.
hmm Welcome to the Craftsman's Collective. I want to thank everybody who's tuned in for the first two episodes, especially as I learned how to do this whole weird podcasting thing. My inexperience definitely comes through in this episode. I had a couple stumblings, we had some technical issues. I tried to fix all of them as best I could in post, but there's a little bit of stuttering that happens throughout the episode. Brent covers some really good information in this, so if you could just look past my inexperience in this one, I'm sure that if you like the things that he covers, or if you plan to do some of those things, the information that he covers will be incredibly helpful. Now, on to the original intro for this episode. Thanks again, guys. My guest today is Brent Indenbosch. He is the owner operator of Diamond Finish Concrete Countertops in Chilliwack, British Columbia, Canada. We talk quite a bit about fireplace surrounds and fire tables in the first half. The second half, we talk a lot about rapid set and why he is a big advocate of shops, especially smaller shops, using rapid set. And then we close out the episode talking about Brent's approach to work-life balance with some pretty good ideas you might want to try. As usual, check the show notes for timestamps if you're looking for something specific, and any resources we mentioned throughout the episode will be there as well. Sorry about the long intro. Let's get into the episode, and I hope you enjoy. So, concrete in general, how did you come to the industry? I guess would be a good way to say it.
Yeah, so I was saying I was kind of born into the industry. My grandfather did concrete for all his work and most of his life, and then my uncle also did it. So then it was kind of natural for me to get into the concrete. That was the flat work, basements, driveways, stuff like that. And then I started my own flat work business at a young age, doing driveways, basements, a little bit of commercial stuff. Uh, as for the decorative side, stamped concrete, that was about it. And then in 2008, when the market crashed, I was left holding the bag on a bunch of jobs and money and stuff. So then I went into heavy civil because we were building a lot of bridges out here at the time, and there was pretty good money in that. So I switched over to that for 9 years or so, and then no, 6 years, and then was in heavy civil for 6 years. Then we had our first son, so I wanted to get back home because I was working all over the province of British Columbia, and I'd be gone for weeks at a time. So I wanted to do something back home again, but I didn't want to get back into the flat work business because there's a lot of competition and everybody was beating each other up on prices. So I wanted to get into the specialty. I wanted to stay with concrete, and yeah, so that's where I kind of was Googling a bit. It was about the same time that World of Concrete was happening, so I was Googling that, and then I came across CCI, and then signed up for their February class. I think it was. I forget the year. I think it might have been 2012 or 2013. So then I went and spent a week with CCI, and that was kind of the whole start of it. Slowly, but rolled that way.
So, when I look at a lot of the work that you do, I mean, one, it's baffling how you make it through your labyrinths. But aside, anybody who's seen like the videos that you do is just like I don't, it just blows my mind. Um, but do you have just so okay? So here, so people can kind of get an idea that they don't know you. What are the main things that you focus on? Like, do you have a certain like products that are like your bread and butter uh, that you make on like a continual basis, or maybe that you just focus on?
Um, I know I don't particularly focus on one certain thing. I kind of I like keeping it custom. I don't really want to do repetitive, same old every time.
Hmm
So I love it when I get something challenging and new. So I'd go all the way across the board. We do a ton of fire tables, fire bowls. Um, so yeah, those ones are fairly easy, right? Your turnaround's pretty quick
Hmm.
on the easy ones, the rectangles or bowls or whatever. Um, Countertops, we do say about four so indoor kitchens a year, and then outdoor kitchens we do quite a few of those. I have like five big ones on the go right now, and then sinks is a pretty big thing for us because we got CSA certification on those.
Yeah.
So that was big. Um, it's just a hard sell because yeah, I don't really want to. The whole idea was to maybe go online and somebody clicks on your website and orders a sink of this and a sink of that, but I didn't want to be sitting there just filling orders.
Yeah.
That's not what I wanted to do.
Hmm.
So we got the CSA certification, which is great for local stuff. We charge a lot more for our sinks that way, and they don't have to work around inspection. Uh, Dining tables and stuff, we do a bunch of those. Fireplace surrounds, we do a lot of those. Those are kind of nice because people kind of let you choose what you're gonna do, kind of thing. Um, Bread and butter, I wouldn't say there's one over the other. Sinks probably take a lot of work for what they're worth,
Yeah.
but yeah,
When you say
fire.
sinks, are you talking more like bathroom vanity tops and all that type of stuff, or like vessel sinks?
Yeah, no bathroom vanity with it with
Hmm.
an integral sink in there. I really don't like doing vessel sinks. They're just not way too much work for the price that you could charge for them.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I like doing more of the integral ones. Yeah, for sure.
Do you have? Because that's what I always think of. Man, I love looking at your feed and like the fire tables that pop up and like because I've only made one and I made it so much more complicated than than it needed to be. Um, but I love seeing the fire tables and like the fireplace surrounds. Like we're here in Florida, and so there are people who have fireplaces, but it's few and far between. Um, but they've always fascinated me. It's one of those focal pieces where if somebody wants to do something interesting, like that's one of the main places that they'll do it. That and like powder bathrooms are like the two where people are willing to kind of experiment a little bit. Um, but I'd really like to talk about both of those fire tables and fireplace surrounds. Let's start with the fireplace surrounds. So for somebody who's never done one before, what are like the top, I don't know, maybe two or three things where it's like you really need to pay attention to like these things. Like these are the things that will make or break the project.
Yeah, so a little bit on fireplaces around here. Just about every house has at least one fireplace, so there's a lot of opportunity. And they all used to be cultured stone, but with they're more or less going with the contemporary look, I guess, with concrete or industrial look. Big things about the fireplaces is seam placement. Um, I figured that out right away off the top that you don't really want to go all the way around the firebox itself because you're asking for cracks off the top corners with heat and stuff. So seam placement's really big. If you can get there before they frame it, that really helps because then you can tell them how to build it. Because it's nice if they leave the framing of the corners kind of open. It's hard to explain over this, but so they frame up the front, they frame up the sides, and
Mm-hmm.
then they leave the corner open so that when you return with your concrete returns, you don't want to deal with a tight wood corner because then you got to be perfectly square, like half inch, like almost mitered right with your finish then. Whereas if you can get there before they get that far, you can leave those corners open. You can kind of roll your corners of your inside of your panels. That's pretty important because then you don't have to be so tight on your finish on the inside. Plus, it gives you a little bit more strength on that corner.
Oh, you're talking about like putting like a radius on the backside.
That's right. Yeah. So
Yeah,
if you
okay,
get
that
them to
makes more
keep the
sense.
framing, yeah, get them to keep the framing back like I do. I tell them to keep the framing back an inch and a half from the corners. That gives me a little bit more room. That was pretty vital, I found. Um,
Does doing that, like having that inside radius, does that allow you to do like uh like a C shape if you're looking down at it, like where you could do it where it wraps all the way around in one piece, or are you still doing it with like three separate pieces? Does that make sense? Like
yeah,
a
no,
face and the two sides.
I try to do all my panels as in a C shape. That kind of gets me up and over competition. A lot of competition will miter your corners. I
Mm-hmm.
This my last resort is to miter a corner. I'll try always to make it a C panel.
Okay.
Um, and yeah, with the radius it helps. So if you need to get scrim in there, it's pretty hard to get scrim to do a perfect 90, right?
Yeah. 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 It is.
So that helps a bit too.
Okay.
Um,
And like when you're going vertical or when you're stacking C's on top of each other, is there like a number that you like to do height wise? Um, like say three sections, two sections, one section, or does it just matter on like design?
yeah, it's more of a design thing. Um, it's nice to have the least seams possible, but you're gonna have them anyways. So typically work with the height of the fireplace as your start, and then hopefully
Mm-hmm.
from the fireplace to the ceiling you can divide that up into a fairly equal number that's close to your first panel, and then that's usually what you can get away with. And then on the seam part, yeah, you want to kind of sell the seam. So the last one we did, it had a recessed inch by half inch or whatever. That was
Mm.
pretty neat, um, as opposed to just dry stacking. That can, I don't know, it looks good too, but it's harder to fill the seam and all that kind of stuff.
And so those seams, what are you filling them with? Like, what is your preferred material? I guess.
Yeah, there's a couple different things, and I'm always changing my mind. Never fill them with grout because that's going to expand and contract and fall out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in the beginning, I was just using just plain old caulking. We tape them really tight and then caulk them in. Um, Past couple of years, we've been actually just leaving them empty, leaving them an eighth of an inch open because that's
Mm-hmm.
our spacer with our wedge system. And then we paint in behind it. We paint it black, and then stack your things and just leave it open, and it actually looks pretty good. And then you don't have to worry about all that taping stuff. And then if other people want, then there is different caulks that you can get that are, or caulks that you can get that are similar to the color, um,
Mm-hmm.
similar to the color that you're doing. And then, like I said, with the last big one we did, we had we worked with the seams, made that 1 inch by half inch reveal. So then that takes care of itself. You don't see the seam really, or the blockwork fireplace that we just mimicked. Then that dry stacked, you don't see those seams. Plus, we grouted the whole thing then, because they were like big seams between each block. We had stacks of 2 blocks, and then yeah, that's that big tall one with the blockwork.
Um. So what is the name of the wedge system that you do use for when you're stacking your panels up? Just so people could look at that if they decide to go that route.
Yeah, I don't know the actual name of it. It's just a tile. It's a tile system. It's from Home Depot. It's a blue and a yellow box. I can tell you that much.
Oh yeah.
they're they're white spacers. They're an eighth of an inch thick, and then they come with yellow wedges. That's one local way of doing it. I think you can get better wedges online and stuff, but then you're waiting for shipping and all that kind of fun stuff too.
Yeah. Is there anything that you? Well, I'm assuming that you've used those for a while, so you probably don't look around. Is there? Because some of the tile systems they don't. How thick are you making your panels?
Half inch.
Okay, so you can kind of get away with pretty much any of the tile systems.
That's right. Yeah.
Um, Even with the reveal that you were doing, I don't know the technical terms for it. This is kind of where I'm a little bit of a noob. But that recessed area for your joint, do you have that where it's a half inch? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so where the recess was, because the recess was half inch thick, and then your panel's half inch thick. We were 1 inch thick on the bottom. I'd say 4 inches, and then we went back to our half inch thickness for your weight savings, and then back at the top of the panels where you thicken out to 1 inch again to receive the next panel.
So you have a bit of a recess in the back of your panels.
Yep, just for weight saving.
Okay.
And then a couple spots where we're full thickness, like some bands in there,
Mm-hmm.
where you can apply the adhesive.
And okay, so yeah, that makes a lot more sense. What are you creating that recess in the back with? Do you just like not feel it quite as full, and you're kind of like, it's kind of about a half an inch, or do you put like foam in the mold to make sure that it is like? How do you make sure that you stay at that half-inch thickness?
Well, I have my sprayer system, right?
Yep.
So that's pretty handy. I got it worked out just with over the years that each pass is about a quarter inch. So I just
Mm.
build up. So that would be two passes done, kind of thing.
Are you doing
Um,
scrim after a pass or no?
yeah, I build up a little bit first, then I do scrim, depending where your pulling factor is going to be, and then top it up after that. Yeah.
Let's say you have your very first panel, you're about to put the very bottom panel up that's there by the fireplace. Are you putting anything down between like the floor or your substrate or the hearth and that to kind of protect the bottom? You just set it directly on that. Does that make sense?
Depending on how level the floor is. Yeah, depending
uh,
how level the floor is. Uh, Typically, we try and keep it up just a little bit.
it's just those shims.
Um, yeah, yeah, just a real small shim. Uh, but yeah, some places, who knows how unlevel the floor is, so you got to be tight on the one side and then sneak it up a bit on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can always start cutting your panels and stuff, but then if you get a little wobble in there, it makes you look like the idiot. So,
Yeah. Um, so okay, so I guess backing up even before that, are you templating off of these fireplaces, or are you just taking drawings and going off of the drawings?
I started off with templating. Now I just do detailed drawings, measure on site. I find it a lot easier than trying to hang up a template.
Yeah.
You just have to, you got to really get a measurement system figured out where you got measurements of what the actual wood framing is, what you have to be. You got to make sure that they framed it nice and square, that they're not walking out with the walls or whatever if they got returns. And then, yeah, placement of your fireplace is really important. Stuff like that. We've done fairly well. I screwed up one or two in the past couple of years, but they were small, so
Mm-hmm.
it'll happen.
Yeah, so when you're doing the drawings, so the unlevel floor, for example, sure that if you have to shim a side up, that doesn't like screw you for the fireplace, because you obviously can't have a crooked fireplace opening. Like, how do you build in wiggle room for yourself to make sure that doesn't end up happening?
So we usually allow an eighth of an inch per seam. It's not a lot, but you can, and then, well, on your initial measure up, you're going to make sure that the fireplace is level. You're going to check the level of the floor, so you'll have a pretty good idea of where you're at. If your floor is way out of level, then they either got to
Mm-hmm.
fix it, or you have to work it into your first panel when you build that panel. What I'm saying is you don't want to be on
Mm-hmm.
site and then cutting on site. So if it is that far out of level, you just work that into your build on your first panel, and then you can go up from that way. And as long as your first panel, the top of your first panel is level, fireplace is level, then it's pretty easy going from there. It's just stack away.
Okay. I'm assuming you
Yeah,
use PL
PL
adhesive.
Premium.
Do you do do you do a strip, or do you put like some guys like doing big old dollops or lines? Like, do you have a preference? Does it matter?
If you can, if you have a plywood substrate in behind there, you got to make a nice big fat circle. And then when you press that panel in there, it pops the air out. It'll actually create its own little suction cup for the initial cure.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty neat. I learned that from a tile guy, and it works good. Like if you ever have to pull a panel off when it's still wet, like you really got to pull to break that seal. It's pretty handy.
All right, so obviously, if you only have 2x4s or whatever you're connecting to, you have to do strips.
Yeah.
Um, if you have plywood backing, are you doing just that vertical, or doing auxiliary like dabs or whatever as well?
Mainly just a couple big circles, and then along the top and the bottom, I'll do a strip or so. And then we
Mm.
also use a PL. I forget what the name is. It's a PL premium product. It's a foam, and it's a quick set. It's like 10 minutes or so. And we also spray that on there, and that so a lot of people know that PL will expand as it's curing, but this
Hmm.
foam is strong enough to hold it so that nothing's going to move in that initial cure. It works pretty handy.
Okay, so once you have that first panel on there, you've already got your wedge system set in place. I'm assuming it's like the T shape parts, and you have the face that comes out, and you wedge that.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is so you have your wedges in, and then that's what's going to protect your bottom. You set your on top of it. Um, I've seen where guys use every once in a while they'll have like a 2x4, and that's to kind of level up the pieces. Do you have to do that with the wedge system that you use, or no, not really?
Typically not. If you are fighting, say, a big wave in the wall or something, and those wedges, if you apply too much force on them, you'll pop them. So then, if you
Mm-hmm.
have to sneak in, you sneak a screw in the seam with a 2x4 on there just to help hold it up against the wall till your glue's cured. And then quite often with the last panel, that's just a way to make sure it's not going to fall off till it's cured as well. Yeah.
Um, are you use specific? I know because some screws are thicker than others. Is there a particular screw that you're using for that? Like a cabinet screw or something like that?
No, just number eights, the gold zinc screws or whatever they are.
Is there anything else where uh like you really need to pay attention to this when you're doing fireplace surrounds?
Um, no, like not really. Um, no, as long as your seam placement's figured out with the well, the designer's gonna want a bit of input on that. The main thing is that you can handle those pieces. You don't want to make them too big that they're like super heavy to get up there. So returns are nice. Like if you can work a return into the piece, it's nice. It just gives it a bit more stability while you're picking it up and putting it up there and hanging it up there. Um, Other than that, I was looking at my own fireplace. No, it's pretty straightforward. Like that's the nice thing about fireplaces is it's pretty straightforward. Once you do one or two, it clicks pretty easy. And it's just a matter of it's you got to measure. You got to be real bang on with your measurements because yeah, once you got to start cutting on site. If you screw up once or something, then that
Mm-hmm.
goes all the way, and you got a problem. You're not making it to the top.
Yeah. Uh, well, I mean, if you mess up one of those panels, it's the chances of you getting exactly the same color on a remake is pretty low.
Yeah,
Um,
I'd
and
probably
you may end up having to
sooner.
make the whole thing
Like I don't
again.
know if I exactly. I don't know if I would go ahead with remaking just one panel. Um,
Mm.
no, I don't think I'd do that. Depending on
I
the
mean, that's
lighting on
good
the
to
place
know.
too. But if you most places that like they're big high fireplaces, and then if you got to remake one panel out of a whole stack, maybe most people won't notice, but it would bug me forever.
Yeah, especially if you're adding pigment. Maybe if you're doing just like straight white Portland where you're not adding any pigment, you could probably get away with it. Uh, but yeah, anything outside of that, it sounds like you're just playing with fire. Um, okay, so set up to do install. Obviously, the one that goes on the floor, super easy to. When you start stacking them, what does that look like? Because I've only put one thing up high on the wall, and I just used like one of those like material lifts that has like the fork, and you just crank it up, and it just that. Do you use one to get the other high panels up there, and you and like another guy stand on scaffolding? How do you go about doing that?
Yeah, it's a little sketch. We usually got scaffolding set up. The last fireplace, those were some pretty big panels. So yeah, so we set up the scaffolding in like a stair or step formation. We got low one, and then we go higher, and then right up against the fireplace. Of course, we got our three stacked up high, and then we just pass up the panels onto that step
Mm.
progression. And yeah, it usually takes at least four guys, and then yeah, it gets pretty crowded up there too.
Okay, so you prefer to use scaffolding and kind of just walk it up as you go, as opposed to.
Yeah, I've never used the material lift before.
Okay.
Um, I don't know. Usually when I get into a house, they got some fancy floor that's all finished already, and I don't want to
Mm-hmm.
wreck that floor with some kind of material lift or some kind of flex in the floor. Who knows?
Yeah,
So
are
we
you
just
putting
set
ram
down.
board down first?
Yeah, we put down blankets and then plywood and then scaffolding on
Mm.
top of that.
Oh, okay, you're going hardcore. Nice.
Yeah, those floors are expensive.
I bet. I mean, see, so I've never done a fireplace surround. So that actually going through all that actually makes me feel confident that I could actually do one of those. It seems a lot more straightforward than I assumed. I have a tendency of making everything more complicated than it is, uh, which is also what I do with fire tables. So, are you so with your fire tables? You just have an exterior mold? You spray that, and then you spray your backer in, and then you're just like, yeah, I'm done. Is that how you have yours set up to do?
Pretty much, my firebowl molds or my fire table molds, they haven't strayed far from what I've learned from Jeff Jard way back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
You got your one-sided form, your spray your mist or face coat, whatever you want to call it, in there. You're backing it up, and then depending on the design of your standoff off the ground or whatnot, I try and yeah, that's a whole nother thing. But so if I try and make a false floor on the ends to carry some feet so that it has a 2 inch standoff or a 1 inch standoff off the ground.
Mm-hmm.
But because I'm using rapid set and I'm spraying it up with my gun, I can usually do that all at the same time as my initial pour. Um, but yeah, it's essentially the same design as what Jeff had taught in his class with his fire tables.
Okay. Um, the things that always been interesting with those for me is like the install. Are you putting any leveling feet on yours, or do you just um, are you just setting it directly on the ground with the concrete?
Typically, we're just going with the grade. Um, Most of the time, the patios that you're going to be installing on are going to be real close to level.
Mm-hmm.
They might have a slight slope on there, but over the footprint of your fire table, you won't really notice that. If there's a little bit of a wobble in it, I put a shim underneath, crack
Okay.
it off on the inside. You don't see it from the other side. Yeah, I don't go to the extent of putting leveling feet in there. If someone wanted me to put leveling feet in there and they're going to pay me for it, for sure I'll do that. But
Mm-hmm.
um, typically that's a detail that would just get overlooked and be a lot of my time spent on it.
Yeah. Um, are are all of the majority of yours, they're all hard plumbed in?
Yeah,
Yeah, okay. So you don't have to worry about like propane drawers or anything like that.
no, I don't do. I do maybe one or two propanes a year. Um, I'm not. I'm sure it's fine. I'm not comfortable putting a propane tank underneath the fire itself.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's kind of close. So I've never designed any with the propane tank underneath. I guess if you got a high enough table, it's possible. But um, I did one originally that had propane underneath. It was that 9 foot by 9 foot table I did. But then they ended up switching to natural gas because like I told him, it'd be a pain in the ass to change out the propane all the time from underneath that big table.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Uh, See, because that's the thing is, it seems to be a little bit hit or miss around here, where people assume like the cheap ones that you can get from Home Depot, like the tank is like right underneath the thing. So they just assume that like, oh, well, I'll just have a table made and we'll just slide the thing underneath there. And I don't know, it's like even if you make the drawer, it's still gonna be made out of concrete. It's still gonna be kind of heavy to slide that sucker. Uh, because I did one for a friend, and we did it where the handle actually is magnets, and we spent the magnets alone. We only needed, I think, 4 of them. It was like $150 for magnets that would be strong enough to hold that and then pull it. Um, it's crazy that we spent that much on magnets. Um, so you tried? Do you just not run into that where they have to do a drawer, or do you do you just say no, we don't really do that, or is it just really only comes up like twice a year or so?
Yeah, it only really comes up twice a year, and then I get the opportunity to talk them into putting a line in. So there is ways around it, right? Like if you got a patio in the middle of your yard or like behind your house, but you got lawn all around it, you can get a mole. You can rent a mole, and then that thing it'll pound in a line.
Mm-hmm.
You can measure how far it goes. I don't do it myself. They usually get it figured out, but they can pound a line in and then cut a hole in the center of the patio and plumb your line up that way. I try and just stay away from working around those problems after the fact. It's nice. Usually, if I'm pricing out something on a house, to be like, "Hey, are you getting a fire table too?" Then make sure you got your gas line in before you pour your concrete, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, then yeah, I would say maybe one a year. It's like, well, how do you want it built? If you want a propane tank in there, it's got to be this high. So then, or you can run a hose underneath the carpet. Yeah, I don't deal with that too often, so it's not something I've been trying to figure out and
Mm-hmm.
think around it. Most of the time, like out here, everything's just about all natural gas.
Yeah.
So usually the lines are all conduits in the ground.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that definitely simplifies things.
Yeah.
Are you? I know. I think here you're required to have a plumber hook it up. Are y'all hooking those up, or is like a plumber on site when you're hooking everything up?
Well, the plumber has everything all right up to the end where I would hook into my T valve.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're supposed to do the final hookup, but I mean, we
It's usually
I
just
just
use there.
typically I just do it myself. Yeah,
Yeah.
if it's a contractor I haven't worked with before and they're going to be real fussy about it, then I'll just tell them, yeah, pay for your plumber to be there waiting for us to get everything ready to go, and then they can hook it up. But I mean, it's one connection. We check it right away for leaks and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, if you don't want the liability and whatnot, then just tell the contractor to have a plumber on site for your final hookup.
Yeah. When you're delivering and installing the fire tables, are you? I know some guys like to build different contraptions to kind of wheel things out there. Are you just carrying it, or do you have something that a device or something that you've found is easy to transport them from like your trailer to the site that they're actually sitting down?
Most of them end up into the truck on a pallet, so we're moving around in the shop on a pallet, and then once we get to site, we wheel the pallet out, and then we usually load it onto a cart. The cart, depending on what kind of access we're gonna have. Out here, there's a lot of stairs, so we've actually built some pretty long carts, and then you can span the staircase quite nice.
Mm.
Yeah, I honestly have a handful of different wooden carts that we've built over the years. Depending on the install, that's the cart we're taking along today, kind of thing.
Oh, wow.
Nice big wheels, a long wheelbase, and lots of wheels. I got a 6 foot cart. It's got 4 wheels. That thing can go through just about anything.
Are you using pneumatic wheels or the solid rubber ones?
Yeah, they're like the soft rubber, like the blue rubber. I'm not sure, like a silicone rubber kind of stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, those ones. I don't use air. yeah, then I never have to worry about it leaking out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the weight limits on those seem to be substantially lower than pretty much all the other materials. So even though their off-road capabilities are much higher, you just need a beastly of a tire in order to be able to do that. The solid ones, I got a pair and they seem to work really well so
Yeah, like
far.
these are, I wouldn't call, well, they're solid, but they got a bit of flex to them. So I mean, they're, if you read the sticker when you buy it, it says 150 pounds, but you throw six of those, throw six of those onto a cart, and the carts move 900 pounds. So
Yeah.
easy. Yeah, they
More
squish a
wheels,
little.
that's the answer.
They squish a little.
uh, oh, you just look at them from the profile and they're just screaming. Uh, well, here on well, staying with fire tables, do you are all your molds or the majority of them like reusable molds? Or are you just building melamine boxes for each one since it's a relatively simple build?
Yeah, so my bowls obviously are all fiberglass,
Mm-hmm.
from Crete molds, and my squares and rectangles and all that stuff, those are usually melamine. I made some steel ones about 2 years ago, but the cleaning process and all that stuff is kind of a waste of time. It was just easier if you tape off the top of your melamine, and then once again I'm using rapid set, so it usually
Mm-hmm.
gets hard before it has a chance to expand your melamine. You can get a couple casts out of a melamine one if you treat it good.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, you don't use water and on the grinding process and stuff like that. You can probably get three nice casts out of a melamine mold if you treat it good for sure.
Yeah, I think
Got
people
all your joints. So
underestimate how many times that you could actually use a piece of melamine. Like if
yeah,
you, especially if you clean it real well. I know that some guys are pretty worried. Like if you have just one, because a lot of shops, like I use Portland. Like I just can't move quick enough to use rapid set. So maybe that's it. Maybe if there's just like one, like if there's a hole in the coating somewhere and that swells up just a little bit, you might not even see it. And then when you cast, well, then you're screwed. So maybe Portland shops should avoid reusing melamine unless you can use like the B side. And but rapid set shops, you're pretty confident like you should be able to use it a couple times in a lot of cases. Or do you not do that uh with other projects?
no, yeah, for sure. If you're going to use a Portland product, I yeah, I don't know if you'd be able to use it multiple times. Like with rapid set, that stuff's hard before the melamine has a chance to expand. Like if when we're screaming busy, we don't even caulk the inside corners. We just
Mm-hmm.
slam them up square, and then you just round them off with a grinder, and you don't have to worry about those seams expanding. Whereas if you did that with Portland, those would turn out like junk.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, with the rapid side, it's in half an hour that stuff's rocking. So
Do you so I over the years I've seen you pretty much make everything out of rapid set, right? Unless you just can't get the color.
yeah, I'm 98% rapid set.
Is there a reason for that other than just the speed at which you can move?
No, well, yeah, I love the speed. Strength is good. We rarely ever have cracking issues, like rarely, and we do some pretty tricky pieces once in a while. Um, but I love the speed at what that stuff sets. Like we'll form in the morning, we'll pour it, and then go for lunch. Come back a couple hours later and pop it out of the mold.
Are you wet grinding or do you primarily do dry?
Wet.
Okay.
Everything's set up in the shop for wet grinding. Yeah.
Okay.
Once it starts to cool off, like once your rapid set's losing its heat, then it's pretty much ready to grind.
Okay. Are you using are you using it just straight or are you using citric acid or ice, both, neither?
Citric acid, ice in the summer once in a while, but mainly our go-to number is 0.2% of citric acid.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, this summer we didn't even go any higher. Last year, I would say we'd use 0.4, but this summer we just I've never changed the calculator. I'm keeping it at 0.2. Throw in a bit of ice, but you just got to really be on the ball. That sprayer really helps, right? I'm spraying out 100 pounds in about 3 minutes. So uh, before it's got time to set, you're already done.
Did you go straight to? You have a Rimcraft? Is that the one that you went with?
No, I ended up going with the one from Silica Systems.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they make it anymore. I'm trying to get it out of them. If why they don't make it. I've had this thing for 4 years now. I think other people may have had problems. I had one computer issue in the beginning, but they worked with me and we sorted that out. Other than that, for rapid set, it's 100%. Like I can pour a negative slump if we're working up walls. We draw it right up with Slump Buster,
Mm-hmm.
and and that's all pre-mixed. Like no issues.
Okay, so were when you first got started, did you use a hopper gun when you got started, or did you go straight to the spray system?
No, we used a hopper gun, so 1,100 pounds would take us about 8 hours to pour, and then rapid set you'd have to have that stuff all 4% retarder and ice and all that kind of stuff, or 0.4%. Sorry, but
Yeah, don't use 4% citric acid. You'll
no,
be waiting
no.
for.
But ever since we got that machine, that same 1,100 pounds, we're washed out in an hour and 20 minutes, no problem.
Okay, so
Done.
shops that are kind of starting out, they don't have either the space or the resources at this point to get the big sprayers. What would you still recommend them use rapid set and just know that you really need to max out your dosage for citric acid, and maybe even put in a little bit of ice as well? Or is it one of those things where it may or may not be worth the headache to just use Portland until you get a sprayer system? Like, where do you fall on that kind of spectrum?
If I was to start over, dabble with rapid set, take it slow, learn the beast, figure it out, and then I would make the switch myself. Like, unless like nowadays, I don't try new products that much. Like, there's other products out there now that they can get some pretty quick set on there too.
Mm-hmm.
But I just love the fact that if I can slow it down for those couple of hours for me to place it, get it into the mold, and then it takes off, and I know that I can flip it 6 hours later if I wanted to, or 4 hours later. That's real big for a small shop to be
Mm-hmm.
able to do that. That's how we survived the first couple of years because we're yeah we had a tiny little shop, and for us to be able to pour in the morning and get it off the table by the end of the day, so that the next day we can do the same process. That's what made it for us. Whereas if we had to pour and then sit around all day till tomorrow
Mm-hmm.
before we can flip again, that yeah
Yeah, that was
slows down stuff.
something that Jason Rogers brought up after, because that's rarely made clear to people. Like, okay, yes, it sets up quicker, but the your shop space is very valuable when you have a smaller shop. Whether you're still in like a 2-car garage or a smaller shop, like a that you'll usually find like a lawnmower repair shop. That's that space. Like, if you have one big project, you're done. Like, that's all you got. And if you're doing Portland, you're tied up for at least a week, depending on what your system is set up to do. So can you talk about that a little bit? Like what are the maybe the ancillary benefits of rapid set that people might not think about?
Yeah. So the big thing is the curing. You're getting so much faster curing. You wanna that way you can push that process of it. You can push your initial pour goes quicker. Your initial time to your grinding and your flip is a little quicker. Um, once that thing's laying around for a couple of days, it's way up there on the MPA. You don't have to worry about that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
The main thing is you want to make sure still that it's dry before you seal it. That's
Mm-hmm.
where you still got to allow that day or so of it to dry out before you seal. But it's just all um, that initial time that you save is so big for me of the pouring, and then weighing out's a little quicker too because
Mm-hmm.
your sand and your cement is already dosed out. That was pretty big. Some people don't use polymer. I still use polymer. Um, People probably think I'm crazy. I don't know why, but I mean, I've done a few with it. I thought it acted different, so I keep polymer in there. I use the mix calculator from CCI still,
Mm-hmm.
and no issues.
Yeah, like even on some of the smaller things, like I've only played around with Rapid Set a little bit, but the one thing that I like using it for a lot are like the plant pots that we were making there for a while. If you don't use Forton, I don't know if you use a different one, but if you don't use polymer in that, you've got to change like how you do it because, and I would assume that the bigger the piece, the more that this could be a problem. Um, but it's like night and day difference between a rapid set pot that didn't have Forton in it and one that did. It's kind of hard to explain. Like it's just maybe this might be a little bit obscure, but it doesn't feel right. Like there's just something off. And maybe I'm trying to push it a little bit too quick, but uh, yeah, there was really a difference between the two, and I can't quite put my finger on it because I don't have the experience with rapid set like you do. Um, but I've always wanted to try it because like I like colors. Everybody knows that I like colors and I like my fancy names. And I know you make fun of me when you hear my color names because I don't have like blue 1 2 3. Uh, but like the one thing that I will say is like if you're gonna do rapid set, try to do like a navy blue. Like rapid set makes the most beautiful navy blue. It has the beautiful like grayish tan undertone. Um, it's just beautiful. It's so beautiful. So speaking of colors, since I know you love your colors, um, do do you have samples of different colors that you show people, or do you try, if at all possible, to stick with the same X amount of colors?
I made all the colors years ago when I got into it. It's like 9 years ago now. Um, the only colors that I have in my box is I got gray, dark gray, light gray, black, and white.
Oh, you kill
Nobody else wants anything here. Like I never get asked for colors. I've tried putting them into the cycle. They just get carted around for a year in the box. So it's like, forget it. There's no point in carting them around.
me.
Um, so I've made a bunch of different colors, take pictures of them, post them up on the website or whatever. So if you want to see the different colors, go to the website. Actually, last week I got my first. Oh no, I got two now. So I asked you about that navy blue.
Mm-hmm.
We did a small sink with navy blue that turned out good, and then now I have to do some Benjamin Moore rain tree green or something. So that'll be fun to figure that one out.
Are you color matching that and using Portland, or are you gonna try and use it with a rapid set?
No, I'll do it with the rapid set. So
Send
I'll
me a
go
picture of the
back.
color, and I'll send you a code that I think will be close.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, I mean, otherwise I just got to go back find all my colors somewhere in the shop and then start dosing until I get it. But
Yeah, no, just send me a picture. I'll send you a code.
yeah,
That'll at least give you a good place to start.
yeah, for sure.
Do you? So this is just something weird that I've found, and I've already mentioned this on a previous episode that hasn't been released yet. But what I've found is that most people don't even realize that you can do colors with concrete. Not only do some concrete shops not even know how to do it, but like no customers and designers. Well, I say no, that's obviously hyperbole, but um, when they see like an example of say, um, I don't know, like pink. Pink is really popular here, like lighter pink. Um, do you think that I would be interested in your opinion of this because you've been doing concrete for a while now. You've got a lot of experience. You're firmly in the rapid set camp. Um, is it that people are not doing color in your area because they don't know that it's an option? And they should just maybe they if they got shown something they'd be like, oh, we could do that, that'd be cool. Or is it um like certain areas like it's just not gonna happen, and maybe it's a spectrum.
Yeah. There is a little bit of that where they don't know it, so then they wouldn't pick it. But this is West Coast style out here is pretty big on like they got the cedar, right? So you kind of got your orangey colored wood,
Mm-hmm.
cedar, black steel, and then gray concrete. Like there's a big mix of that. White cabinets with gray concrete on top. So yeah, it's the wood and the concrete going together. That's kind of why they stick with the naturals, my guess.
Mm-hmm.
Like I did a real crazy island at one point. I shipped it out to somewhere in Alberta, and it was all the colors of a sunset. So that was like my extent of my my color experience experiments. But locally, the most I do for coloring is wood form concrete. Like when we do wood, then it's just trying to get the different colors, pulling the different grains out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I don't know. I don't really. I like I said, I don't push the color. It's easier for me not to be farting around trying to figure out
Right.
how to get a color, and I'm just as happy as if they're going. If everybody's within a couple shades of the same, I'm cool with that.
Yeah. Well, there is something to be said about having simplicity in your shop, right? Like you use rapid set. It streamlines things so much easier. It's quicker to batch out. Turnaround time is much quicker. Limiting your colors limits the amount of pigments that you have to have on. You don't have to keep track of so many color codes. Um, and then if you know, I'm gonna toot my own horn a little bit here, but like if you know somebody like me and you have a good relationship with someone like me, like I'm willing to give you the color code. Like most of the people that I know, that as long as there's some reciprocity there, where like if I call them up and I can get some help when I need it, somebody is in most cases completely willing to just give you a code. Like I've already done the work. You're a buddy. I'll just give you the code. Um, so there is something to be said about having things in your life set up that way. Um, Maybe you have to do your own experimentation if you don't know somebody like me. Because if some rando calls me up, I'm like, dude, I've got countless hours in figuring out these color codes. I'm not just going to give you the code. uh, and so what is your take on those types of things? Like newer people are always coming into the fold, right? We always have new people, which is good because they kind of revitalize things. They ask different questions that maybe some of the older guys don't even think about just because of pattern recognition and things like that. But how do you approach that when somebody who is newer and they ask you a somewhat forward question that has taken you years or hours and hours and hours to figure out that thing? Are you most forthcoming with that information, or do they need to meet like a certain threshold? Like, I need to see that you're putting forth at least X amount of effort. Like, how do you approach that?
Yeah, that's a good question. Um, I've asked questions myself in the past, so I if someone phones me up for yeah, I try and answer them the best I can. I want to leave it a little bit cryptic so they got to figure it out themselves because if you're just telling them how to do it, then they're not going to learn either. So, but I at the same time, I don't withhold information. Like somebody asks me, hey, how did you build this tub mold? I'll be like, I did this, and that. Don't do this because that doesn't work, blah, blah,
Mm-hmm.
blah. But yeah, I'll definitely share my information. But if it's somebody that just comes out of the gate kind of thing and they're like, how'd you do this? How'd you do that? How'd you do this? How'd you do this? It's like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
first go figure it out for a little bit first. Once you've tried a couple things and you failed, I'll tell you exactly how to do it. But yeah, I'm willing to share information on how I do pretty much everything as long as they're putting in the effort and trying, or at least giving their two bits too, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not gonna just write it down for them. Okay, here you go.
Yeah. Um, I think probably the reason that I'm a little bit more apprehensive of just answering everyone is because it's not unusual for me to get bombarded with color code questions. Like,
Yeah, that's different. Like that, you've spent a lot of time on that, whereas myself, it's more questions of shop layout or
mm-hmm.
how did you build this mold? How did you build that mold? Which I'm willing to share because um, in the end, you still have to, when you build that mold, you still have to be able to see that thing inside out and backwards before you form it. So,
Mm-hmm.
but color codes, yeah, you're putting in a lot of time. That's why I don't like it, because it
Yeah.
takes a lot of time. So that's why I don't push the color as much either.
Yeah, I
But
mean there is something to be said about having colors, but there's also something to be said about not having colors.
yeah,
Like I don't think people I, I you can see when people are asking questions about it, they kind of get that it takes a while, but they don't want to take that time, right? Um, and then the same thing with like the erosion finish. I have people that ask that from time to time. I'm sorry, man. I've just got too much time into that to just be like, here's the answer. Um, so it's always good for me to ask other people where like there's maybe like a almost like a gate system where like you have to meet this and then you get access to like this much information, and like you get, once you've made it this far, you get access to this kind of information. Because like what you were mentioning with like molds, for example, like I, I don't know, it's gonna kind of, I don't want to diminish it because like some molds are very time consuming and very difficult to make, but for the most part, it's one of the more basic things that we do, right? Uh, so maybe the more basic and standard stuff we just kind of freely give to people, but once you meet like a certain tier, it's just like I'm gonna kind of withhold that a little bit. Uh, is that kind of how you look at it, or is it just like most of the, oh, this is going to sound so condescending, I apologize, I don't mean it this way, but a lot of the things that you do are more basic, right?
yeah,
They're still complicated, but they're, as far as the scale of what we can do, so if like gray rectangles for countertops is down here and then like the super complicated parametric stuff is like up here, once you sit a, like as long as you're below a certain threshold, just share it freely. Question mark.
um, yeah, no, like um, depends. If the people that are asking the questions are putting out information in other areas, then I'll definitely, like, I'm not gonna withhold anything, right? Like, because it's, yeah, it's two different strengths coming together, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I don't know. Like I say, like if they're helping out in other areas, I'll dole out all the information I have, kind of thing.
So for, so that's great for like people who've been around a little bit longer, but the like the brand new person who they've
Oh, yeah.
either like how would you recommend them gaining credibility with you specifically? Like I would need to see that you're doing, maybe not specifics, but like generalities. Like obviously you need to be putting forth effort. I'm not just going to give you everything. Um, you know, because like the newer person doesn't really have much to contribute. I mean, if we're being honest, like you don't know the difference between your ass and a hole in the ground. But we need to see that you're doing something. in order to gain access to information. Is there?
Yeah, no, 100%. So yeah, like I said, if it's on mold building, say, and you, yeah, just give them some ideas. You don't give them exactly how to do it. You like give them a couple different ideas of how they would build it, and then let them work it out on their end exactly how they're gonna get it to that final stage.
Mm-hmm.
Like leave a little bit out, kind of thing. I'm trying to think of a complicated mold that I did. I haven't done too many. We did that one bench a couple of years ago. It had a 44-foot radius. Um, the fronts were, I don't know, 15 degrees. The seat was flat. The back was 10 degrees the other way. Then the top was flat. And then the back side was like, I don't know, 15 degrees back the other way. And that was all on a big radius. So something like that, somebody's like, oh, how do you do that? It's like, well, that took a lot of work, but here goes.
You should go somewhere else.
So at first, when I got asked how I did it, I was like, well, I don't really feel like telling people how I did that because that took me a week and a half to
Mm-hmm.
do. But in the end of the day, it's like, you know what? Other people are going to make cool stuff, and I'm going to want to know how they did it. So I just shared my information. I built half the mold, poured that half, built the other half, and kind of poured them together, like climbed in there and poured it together. I got all pictures of it and stuff too, but I was gonna hold back information on how I built it, and I was like, nah, forget it. I mean, eventually I'm gonna need to make something that I don't understand, so I'd appreciate it if people shared with me how they did it that way too. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's what I mean. Like I try and be as helpful as possible that way.
Yeah.
But
Um. So systems wise, do you have like certain days of the week that you do? I think Rapids that might throw a wrench kind of in this question, but like, do you have certain days where like we do this on this day, we do this on this day, we do this on this day, or is it just like, nah, we move quick enough where we just knock it out in a day?
yeah, pretty much. Like we did a fire surround yesterday. Formed it in the morning, like early, poured it. Forming was not much to do. It was 8-inch returns, 60-inch panel times three, and then the one with the fireplace was a little bit more complicated. We formed that in the morning. Then we poured it as we were forming, and one guy was weighing it out. Then we poured it. So we were done at about 2 o'clock. We did another project the next morning. We ground it out, ground the backside, flipped it over, processed the front side, acid washed it, and it's ready for sealer. Um, so that's like a 2-day turnaround. I typically try to seal on Fridays. That
Mm-hmm.
way, my pieces can sit over the weekend if I have to install. Like if they're pushing hard for them, then at least they get Saturday, Sunday to sit, and then Monday we'll go install. I don't like to leave stuff on the tables over the weekend. Like I won't pour on a Friday afternoon because I'm not going to leave it sit there till Monday.
Ooh.
No, and I hate working weekends. So yeah, I typically don't pour anytime after noon on Fridays because if I'm not going to be able to flip it the same day.
Mm-hmm.
And after, I think other than that, it's just, yeah, it's kind of open season anytime in the shop. I just give her. But
All right. Yeah.
seal on the end of the week, pour in the beginning. That's kind of thing.
I know this is pretty much a contentious situation for whatever reason. What sealers are you currently using and for what?
Yeah.
If you don't feel
So,
comfortable mention it,
oh no,
that's fine.
no, no. I'll give you my 2 cents on that. I think I've tried everything. For years, I used H12. That worked well, but in my situation, it did not cure quick enough. Then I made over the switch to XS a number of years ago, XS 327.
Mm-hmm.
I've had really good success with it. I've tried other ones and new ones in between. Um, and whether I think it's usually my fault if they don't work out because I'm just not giving them enough time, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm pushing them too hard, stuff like that. So XS is my go-to right now. Um, for fireplaces, actually, I'll use a stamp shield sometimes. Quite often it'll be XS, but if I'm really pushed for time, I'll spray them up with stamp shield because they don't see a lot of wear and tear.
Mm-hmm.
But I typically use XS on almost everything.
Even the like fire tables outside and all.
Yeah,
Are
yeah.
you are you spraying the inside of those because they're outside? Like your climate is just nasty compared to like mine. Like I don't have to worry about freeze thaw. Um, I just in case anybody doesn't know, XS is a topical coating. Um, are you using? Do you wrap XS all the way down under the part that comes into contact with the ground, or are you using stamp shield there?
Yeah, well, the only thing that would be touching the ground outside would be the feet. Those are recessed underneath the table. They're accessed on the sides. There's nothing on the bottom. I mean, you might get a little bit of moisture wicking up
Mm-hmm.
onto the feet, but nothing onto the table. I don't seal the insides of the table. I only seal
Mm-hmm.
what you see um, with the excess. And yeah, I knock on wood, but I haven't had callbacks in a long time, like a couple of years.
Yeah, because I know that there seems to be a bit of debate on when you put a piece outside on like which surfaces to seal. Like, do you seal all around the edges and the top, and the bottom is just kind of meh as long as you put a little bit of a border around the underside? Some people are like, no, you need to seal the entire thing to make it a complete closed envelope. Um, I know that you said you had some outdoor kitchens coming up. What do you do on the undersides of those, or do you just leave them?
I leave them open. My train of thought might not be the right one, is that I don't want to lock anything in there. Like, so if you got moisture coming down from the top and it can't leave through the bottom
Mm-hmm.
because it's sealed, I don't know, it might not make sense, but that's kind of my thinking behind it. So I just seal the top and the sides. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
I leave the bottom open, let it breathe.
Are you also sealing around the underside of like a drain, the drain assembly, if you're doing an
Yeah,
integral sink?
yeah. With those, yeah, we seal all the way around those.
Okay. Um, are you? Yeah, sealing is such a divisive topic in our industry, and I don't understand why. Maybe it's because I'm more of a neutral party. Um, there's just so much contention between people on that. Is there? Do you have any? I might regret asking this. Are there any penetrating sealers that you use that you really like using other than Stamp Shield, or is it because like simplicity's sake? Like I love how simple you make everything. Like I really need to take more of that, but um, is it just for simplicity's sake? Like we keep Stamp Shield on hand and we have excess, and then I don't have to worry about anything else. Is that it, or like you just don't like using the other or an
No, it's
other?
nothing. It's nothing against the other ones. It's in the beginning when when I had started out, it was like, oh, here's this sealer, got to try that. Oh, here's this sealer, got to try that. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
this is the new one. That must be the best one now. And every time you just screw yourself because in the end of the day, you end up with 19 different projects with 13 different sealers. And
Mm-hmm.
if you get a callback, you got to figure out, or hopefully you wrote it down, but you got to remember how you applied it, what you
Mm-hmm.
did in case you got to go fix it or something like that. So that's why simplifying it for me, um, I use one sealer for this, and if something has to be done real quick and I know it's not going to get a lot of use, I'm going to use that sealer. Um, there is other sealers that I'll be trying, and I do try them, but I've made the mistake twice with past sealers. I won't even mention that. I won't mention them just because it's not the sealer's fault, but I jumped in like both feet. Let's go. This is the sealer.
Mm-hmm.
And then after a couple projects, like, oh shit, this isn't working out. So now what I do is I just slowly do some pieces in that sealer. I know where they are. I know what kind of use they're going to get, and I just keep an eye on that for a year, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And if it works out, and we think it makes sense to make the switch, we'll do it. But and my house is the testing
Yep.
floor for a lot of things. I got like 9 different pieces of concrete in here with 9 different sealers right now, and they're all being evaluated every day. So
Yeah, I think it's important for people to understand that like if you're constantly hopping between different sealers, there's I don't care what sealer it is, it does not matter. There's a learning curve, some more steep than others, and if you're hopping too quickly, there's no time for you to get to the proficiency state. So like you could be having problems with a sealer in the beginning, and it's 100% your fault, right? Like maybe you didn't acid hard enough, or maybe your concrete, if you're doing a custom blend, is not compatible that well with another sealer. Like there are things that you have to work through, and if you don't work through those things, you could just be burning money because you don't give yourself that time to learn the sealer. Um, there there's also something to be said, like if you make a thing, like whether you're a woodworker or a steel worker or concrete like us, if you don't have this stuff in your house and you have a really good understanding of how it works, like you're almost doing a disservice to like your customer. Like it's that kind of like when you go to like the Ford dealership and he's driving a Chevy. Like,
yeah,
I don't know if I can trust you.
yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, there's something to be said about jumping back and forth and stuff like that. So that's kind of why we've stuck with what's been working for us. In the beginning of using excess, it was like, well, that stuff goes down really fast. You're gonna be hard not to get orange peel, but um, yeah, we figured out that, and we've had no issues with that. Like with the application process, I think my one guy now seals everything by himself, and big pieces, small pieces, and he's got it down pat. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to change it up on him.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if you're running a shop that's got multiple people in it, that's really not fair to them either, right?
No.
Because like there is really something to be said about having a certain level of efficiency. Um, Now, how each shop weighs, like, because technology will inevitably get better, is like finding out, like, okay, well, we've now reached that threshold of like, okay, it's time to change to the newer, the better, etc. Uh, and that seems like a very tricky thing for people to kind of balance. Is there any? I know you like to keep things the same, but is there any like methodologies that you go through or like thought patterns for trying new things out? Um, like I know you mentioned like with the sealers, for example, you have several pieces there in your house. Is like how do you view that? How do you view looking like taking in new information and deciding whether or not to assimilate it?
Yeah. Like you say, you gotta weigh out what's the benefit for you to switch. Is it stronger? Is it gonna save you time? Um, so first, those are pretty much the two biggest things for me for sealer. How long is it gonna take me to apply it,
Mm-hmm.
and what kind of results am I gonna get? And then I guess the third being, what's it gonna be like to go back and fix it? I don't want to be going back once a year to maintain or reapply a sealer. That's no. I want to apply it, and I want it to be good for a number of years. And then if I have to go back, we give it a light sand kind of thing, reapply it. Um, so durability is pretty big. Ease of application, that's not such a big thing for me, because that's something you'll learn with time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, so I mean, if you can get a bunch of different pieces, like I say, for everybody out there trying new stuff, get it into your house first. Let your family abuse it and use it and see what it takes, what it needs. And then once you're confident with the process of that sealer, then throw it out there. You can start with just a couple of pieces too, right? Like, depending on your color difference too. I noticed that between um, H12 Stamp Shield and XS, they're all quite close with finished product color wise. Because that's the other thing is you switch up your sealer, well now all your colors are
Mm-hmm.
shot. So
Oh yeah. Now maybe if you
so
only have like two colors, it's not that much of an issue. But
that's right. That's right. So
for
if it's gray
me,
or black, it's gray or black.
yeah.
So yeah, that's another big thing too. Is it worth it for you to change your whole color palette just to switch out a sealer that only does one thing a little bit better than the last one? Whereas an educated customer can help you a lot more than switching your whole product line. Like
Mm-hmm.
so,
Yeah, like if you're somebody that's in either in my position or somebody who would like to add color to their repertoire, uh, you need to be very, very, very careful with hopping between different materials because those color codes, they're only good if you keep things very, very similar. Um, because I've already run into that problem several times. Like I do have, so I use seal hair. I love it. It's just like I'm just not very good at applying other sealers, and that one gives me it gives me the wiggle room that I need to fix it if I get like a line or something like that. That's just what I use. But if you have like color samples and all, those little like 4x2 things or whatever, breaking that out to seal those is just that's not practical at all. But you can use Enrich and Seal from Home Depot. It's a penetrating sealer, but it looks color wise identical. Um, but with that being said, I also use ICT, and the colors are nowhere close to each other. So that's why I think it's good that you brought that up. Like, you need to be careful. Like, if you're constantly switching, that could just throw your color codes right out the window. And that's a lot of time that you just burned for maybe just an incremental difference. Uh, I don't know. This might not actually have an answer to it, but is there a way that you judge like how much better something should be in order for you to kind of take it on? Like that seems like a very difficult thing to measure.
yeah, um, yeah, we had a lot of deliberation about that with sealers lately. Is okay, so it's gonna go down a lot quicker, but just yeah, just what the unknown is what scares me now. So I know what I'm getting from the product I have.
Mm-hmm.
So the new product has to it's really got to shatter the ceiling for me to switch. Like it's got to be better in a number of different ways. If it's just one little thing, then I'm not interested anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like I say, I am always trying new stuff in the background and work out the kinks that way so you can kind of roll into it. That way it's
Mm-hmm.
not such a big decision, right? You don't want to come in on Monday using one sealer and then go out Friday using another sealer because you're just asking for all kinds of hurt. You're gonna
Mm-hmm.
have all kinds of trouble. And that's what I did in the beginning as a rookie too. Is
Yeah.
oh this is a new sealer. It's got to be good. So right on, throw the other one out the window and start using this one. Well, you go through a
Yeah.
whole learning curve,
Mm-hmm.
so you waste a month or 2 months of product and time. But
Yeah, it's also kind of hard to keep track of what projects have what if you're
yeah,
putting too many things out there. That can get a little dicey too, because
yeah.
people are people. What So what kind of things are you saying to clients when you are talking with them? Like this is how you need to take care of your piece because topicals do require a different maybe mindset or approach than say penetrating sealers. So what are the type of things that you're making people aware of? I hate the term setting expectations. Like it just for whatever reason that rubs me the wrong way, but like what do people like what do you let them know that they need to be mindful of when you're using these pieces, say in the most high traffic areas like a kitchen countertop? What does that conversation look like?
Yeah. So the concrete itself is indestructible. The sealer is not. Kind of the main the
That's
main
a
thing.
good, yeah, yeah.
Because people are like, well, it's concrete, it's got to be indestructible. It's like, no, no. If you want indestructible, get quartz. But I've seen quartz with chipped edges too.
Yep,
So, and I've also seen
and
stained
stained.
quartz.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen stained quartz as well. So, um, yeah, just the key is it's going to depends what you want it to look like. If you're going to get a bit of wear and tear on it, it's I don't know. Like our dining table at home is it's got some good decent wear and tear on it, but it's also telling a story as well. So of just everything. Um, as for telling a client, I tell them beforehand, like you're not going to be able to grab your big heavy pot and slide it across here just after you pulled vegetables out of the garden because that your sealer's completely finished. Then you got all
Mm-hmm.
that sand underneath the heavy pot. It's done. Like it doesn't have a tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're going to wipe your counters every time right before you use them, use cutting boards. Obviously, you're not cutting directly on your sealer. Make sure you use pot trivets. And then we also suggest using that wax.
Mm-hmm.
I forget exactly what it's called, but it's that yellow spray-on wax. You kind of
Yeah, the
buff that.
beeswax.
Yeah, that's
Mm-hmm.
right. A bunch of guys use that. That helps quite a bit, I think, for glancing off scratches and whatnot. Um, but yeah, set expectations. I guess that's what you call it. Yeah. Just give them. Yeah. Just explain what's going to happen when you do this. What you gonna when you do that. Like if you're going to take a, a a lid off of a pot that's been boiling and you got all that moisture and you set that down flat on concrete. Just about any sealer you use, just about you're going to pull moisture up underneath that sealer. Like so, it's not one sealer against the other. It's more the characteristics of the concrete.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, it's a different product, right? It's not your quartz. It's the concrete is yeah. I don't know.
I don't even know if you could do that with quartz. Quartz does not handle that like that really high heat. Like you can't do a like I think people say you can't do like hot pots on them or something. It'll turn them yellow or I don't know. I don't know that much about quartz. I don't
No.
use quartz, but uh, yeah, it's interesting that a lot of the things that we are supposed to talk with clients about prior to them even getting it in their house are like basic things that they should already be doing, right?
Pretty much.
Uh, like you don't cut directly on your like you use stones to sharpen knives. Therefore, if you take your knife and you turn it perpendicular to it, you are dulling your knife. Like just from a practical standpoint, like so so that's the part that I don't really understand is like people that have a lot of callbacks. Like, what do you think is happening there? Is it just like concrete is not the material for that client and they should have been told no, or like where is the disconnect between that? Because like callbacks are something that scare a lot of people, and so like what do you think is going on there? Like what is the mechanism at play?
Yeah, I think that's probably a big thing. Is it shouldn't have been in that house in the first place. Like a spec house, I would not put concrete in a spec house, something that's going to get rented out to different people, whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's why I only do 4 interior kitchens a year. I vet the customers pretty good. Like, this is what you're going to be getting. What are you expecting? And if this happens, is that going to disappoint you? So, if yes to any one of those, well, then sorry, it's not the right product for you. Um, and then I've in like, whereas I've gone back to people 6 years later and looked at their concrete, which I did topical sealers, like a Buddy Rhodes one way back in the day, probably 6, 7 years ago, and I went back just a little while ago, and it looked like the day I installed it. I was like, "Do
Mm-hmm.
you not use your kitchen?" Oh, we use it all the time, but we're just
Dude,
right. They respect it, so yeah,
see, that's interesting. That's see, that's real. That's something that I don't think people maybe. I mean, I didn't even think about it. Is just do fewer kitchens.
yeah.
Just don't do that many kitchens.
Do it
And
for
I
the
think
people. Do
go
it for
ahead.
the people that do it for the people that are that know what they're getting, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, they're going to treat it with respect, and they're going to do their little bits of maintenance and whatnot on it. So
I think that might be scary to people. Now, I can see how a lot of people would be scared to say that because, like, when people think concrete, right? They think concrete countertops. Like there are companies in my area, they have concrete countertops in their name, or that is the name. I don't, I wonder if people don't realize that there are just so many other things that you can make where you don't have to make like countertops, for example, are like the only thing that you make. Um, it, okay, maybe this is an interesting thing that you can maybe talk about since you do so few kitchens, both inside and outside. What does what is that conversation with a designer? Do you primarily work with designers, architects, or
a lot of designers, yeah.
so? What does that conversation look like to where because that conversation has to be very different than somebody who says, "Yes, I make concrete countertops." Dot dot dot. Um, what does that conversation even look like to where that's not like your the foot that you lead with?
Yeah. So they asked me how concrete is. I'll explain to them that you got yeah you it's it well first the big thing is it's handmade, right? It's handmade. It's local.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a pretty big seller right there. People are kind of going back to that. They don't just want a bunch chunk of rock shipped across the ocean kind of thing. Um, and then as for the sealer and whatnot, you set their expectation again. What's the client like? Is it somebody that's going to like extensively use their kitchen 3 times a day, and then they want a concrete kitchen sink? It's like, no, that's not going to happen. I'm not going to put a sink in there because I know that sink is going to get trashed.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we really want the sink. Okay, well, this is what the sink is going to look like in 6 months. So if you tell them and let them know, um, then they kind of take it from there. The designers, um, yeah, I don't know. I don't sell a lot of kitchens to designers per se. Actually, like that's mainly fireplaces and bathroom vanities. I do the odd kitchen for designers, but I think I set their expectations enough right away. I don't scare them away, but they're set up for 1 or 2 different kind of clients that's going to get the concrete countertops. They're not going to put it in every single design that they have, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then if you only have a few designers and they're looking for that 1 out of 10 people, that kind of limits the amount of countertops you do that way. And that's also why I do so much other work and not just countertops. Like my name is Diamond Finish Concrete Countertops, but 30% of my work is countertops.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's so much more.
So so when you're with that initial interaction with a designer, um, I'm making a huge assumption here, but the few people that I've come across that even know that concrete countertops exist, they have no clue that anything outside of that exists. So even if they know that countertops in concrete is an option, they don't even know about well, fire tables are probably the other one that they're aware of, but like furniture, nope. Fireplace surrounds, nope. Um, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So like
Okay.
like when
Yeah.
you talk with a designer, do are they aware of those extra things that you do, or is
Yeah. Okay. I see what you're saying. So a big part of that's on you when you get the initial drawing for a place. They'll send you a drawing. They'll be like, "We need this bathroom vanity," and they give you a tiny little 24 by 12-inch bathroom vanity.
oh,
It's on you to look on the rest of the plans and be like, hey, you could use concrete for this application, you could use it for this, you could use it for that, and you can use it for
mm,
this. So then you can educate them that way a little bit. And then the other thing is Instagram has got all your pictures of all your products, and that's kind of your big. That's my big seller, anyways, right? Like I'm posting all the different things on Instagram, and so they're already seeing the different applications of what they can use it for.
mm-hmm,
So they're coming to you with their ideas already. But a big one is when you get that initial drawing for an estimate on a small little thing or this thing, look in the rest of the house and be like, hey, you could use concrete for this wall, or you could, like, a concrete dining table over here would look just awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And then that way you open up the dialogue and get them thinking about it.
Yeah. Now, when you're pointing out the extra things that they can do, so like for table, for example, do you do the steel work, or do you have somebody there in your shop that does that?
No, I sub that out, yeah, to a local guy.
Okay. Um, I, is that something that do you design those yourself? Is it more of a
All depends. If people come to me with a design, or if they explain what they want, then we'll try and come up with something. Yeah.
okay? So the when you're looking at the plans and all for the house and all, are you uh, are you how to phrase this? Are you looking for things that you would like to do and kind of pushing the envelope a little bit, or is it staying within like practical things?
Yeah. Depends. Depends how busy I am.
Like that's one way to look at it.
now, now I'm looking at the plans and being like, "Are you sure you want to make that out of concrete? I'm too busy."
We could do this little 24 by 12 vanity for you.
Yeah. Um, yeah. No, for sure. Yeah. There's things that you can do. If there's if there's designs out there that you're like, hey, that would look pretty cool if it was made out of concrete. Just don't overstep your what? How do you say that? Your abilities, I guess. Make sure you, like, as if you're going to push something onto a designer, you want to make sure that you're going to be able to follow through. If they come to you and ask you to do that, then it's a lot different, right? You can be like, yeah, I think I can. Like, give me a bit of time to think about it. I'll work on it. Whereas if you come and say, hey, you should make this out of concrete, well, you better have that figured out,
Mm,
right? Otherwise, you're gonna set the wrong tone there.
that's an interesting way. I didn't even think about it like that. Um, yeah, I didn't even think about that. So if you're the leading force behind it, you should probably have a better idea that you can do it as opposed to if you're approached with that.
That's right.
Huh.
Yeah, if I'm approached with a unique design or something I haven't done, I'll be a little more cautious on it. Or like we'll give it a whirl.
What does that conversation
Let me
look
think.
like? Because like
Um,
you wanna give them enough confidence in what you're saying that you can probably pull it off, but you also don't want to come across like I don't know the fuck I'm doing.
yeah. No, yeah, I don't know. I would um, take my time in that conversation, and then at the same time, I'd say I'm going to need a day or two to think about it, and then I'll think real good and hard about forming methods. What can fail? Like if it's like for instance, a big huge hood fan they want in one piece. Like we did one of those a little while ago.
Mm-hmm.
So it's got to be light enough to be up there. It's got to be thin enough to be light, and they want it in one piece. So can you do that? Yeah, I can, but I got to make it work now. So you just gotta, make sure you give yourself enough time to think about it, to go over all the different scenarios of what can go wrong, what you have to do to make it work before you commit 100% to it.
What would
And then, like, after a bunch of years of doing a bunch of things, and you have a pretty good idea of what you can handle.
mm-hmm. What would be a good way to because there's some people who are just crazy like I do. I might not have a clue how to do any part of the project. Well, yep, I can do it. But it's probably smarter and safer to incrementally uh, acquire those skill sets. What would be a good way for somebody to do something like that? Because it'd be very difficult to uh, the steps might not be so obvious, right? Of like how do I slowly acquire the skills to do uh like a piece of furniture, for example? There's a lot of moving parts that are involved in that. And w- would you say to maybe build some comparable things to that, or just go ahead and jump in with it?
Yeah, depending on the size, you're definitely going to have over the time, you're definitely going to have some pieces of furniture in your house that look almost like the one that you made for that other guy, but they turned out, and yours is the guinea pig. Um, like if you're gonna do crazy designs and stuff like that, you're definitely gonna screw up a couple times.
Mm-hmm.
You have to know that you're gonna be throwing pieces away. Not everything's gonna turn out 100% the first time.
Mm-hmm.
Quite often, quite often it works out, but and that's the thing. Like you gotta know your confidence level. And if you're super confident about it, then you better be ready to throw a piece out if it doesn't work out. Like,
Mm-hmm.
right. And then also, if some designs are similar to designs you've done in the past, then that'll give you a lot more confidence too, right? If only certain things have changed, then you can go in there with a fairly confident, yeah, I can make this piece hang like that or whatever.
So maybe this would be a good way to link the two is that the out I think it was the outdoor sofa that you did with the big radius and all that. Um,
Yeah,
that was quite different than a lot of the other stuff that you had done before that, right?
yeah, for sure. And I jumped into that like, oh yeah, I got this.
So was it false bravado, or is it I've made enough pieces where I'm confident that I can figure it out? Because that almost seems a bit contradictory to what we just said of like don't jump too far too quickly. Uh,
Oh no, I know. I jumped in there like I got this, and then I started scratching my head. it, yeah,
Whoops.
no, it took me a bit to get it all figured out. If someone had asked me a week later if I had that, I was no.
Mm,
Like I definitely jumped into that with way too much gusto, and a good buddy of mine helped me out because he's I don't know if you'd call him an engineer, more of an architect kind of thing, and he was able to draft it up with all the different angles and radiuses, and that way he was able to give me a cut sheet. It wasn't exact, but it was very close. It got me within the
mm-hmm.
ballpark of where I needed to be. And then after the first few couple of cuts and first few couple of days, a little bit of tweaking here and there, and then you'd figure it out. But if I had not had his insight into the radiuses and the angles, and like essentially you're cutting out crescents out of different sheets of material, and without his tools to do that, I would have been lost. Like
Mm-hmm.
I would have probably had to phone up the client and be like, yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know how to do this.
Mm,
I said I could, but I can't. um, so yeah, that was definitely a case of where I got this and I didn't. I should have looked at my resources
mm-hmm.
first, make sure I had a guy that could do that, because yeah, he definitely bailed me out on the layout part of that. But once we started, then it all made sense. But
Okay. So let's say that somebody did want to get to that point where they're doing something that involves different types of cuts and radius and or radii. I don't know what the plural would be. What would be the natural progression like if somebody did want to work to that? Like you obviously start off with like your flat pieces like a countertop, and then you work to a 3D piece of a box. How do you make the jump from a maybe a more simple geometric shape to the more complicated people pieces with like different facets and maybe adding in a radius or two? Um, how would you recommend somebody go about maybe even learning to like let's say that they just make a piece for themselves? Like how would they go about doing that?
um, yeah, you gotta I guess find you gotta find different materials that are gonna work for you first of all, because getting radiuses in a one-time mold can be really expensive. Um, like you gotta, I use a lot of laminate, so you get your laminate, you can bend that around. So laminate, and then you just start pulling different products, see how they pull, see what they pull into, and then you got to figure out your cuts, and then you cut it once or twice, and then it's wrong, and so yeah, I don't know. It's a lot of experimenting that way, but that's why you got to be careful when you start picking up those projects, unless you're really handy with a computer and you got all those programs figured out, which I don't
Mm-hmm.
at all. Most of my stuff is trial and error. Um, but there's different guys out there that are really handy with their computer programs, and they get it all sketched up and with all their cut lists, like I had that one guy do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but once you get the materials that you're using to form, once you get their nature figured out, it definitely helps you think outside of the box a bit more, I
Mm-hmm.
guess. So you kind of know what that material can do, so you know the shapes that you can achieve by it, if that makes any
Mm-hmm.
sense. Um,
Yeah, because like some things you could pull into like a tube, but as soon as you try and take that tube and you try and fold it in on itself, for example, to make it like a donut, there's a lot of materials. The vast majority, they're not going to be able to do that. Like as soon as you try and bend them both horizontally and vertically, that's where you get to where your materials will start saying like, I can't do this pretty quickly.
yeah, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. There's a bunch of different materials out there. Like fabric forming that's a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
You can do a lot of stuff with fabric, and then that way, once you got your fabric forming going, then you fiberglass it, and then if you got excess material, you can cut it off, sand it back, and then fiberglass over that. So, like you say, once you start pulling and shaping things, you're gonna have folds of material. If it's a soft material, that you got nowhere for it to go. So once you start your fiberglass layers, you can build it up. Then you can cut off those folds, sand them back, and then fiberglass over them. They disappear.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a lot of trial and error, like you say. But so fabric is cheap. Whereas if you were to start doing that with some kind of like 3M plastic board at $100
Mm-hmm.
for a 4x8 sheet, mistakes get costly.
Oh yeah, yeah. Like if you're using sheets of like half-inch PVC, like in our area, I think they're up to like $80 a sheet or something like that. Where it used to be like
Yeah,
$35. Yeah, that can get costly
yeah.
real quick. Um, are there any particular like mold materials that you really enjoy working with?
That's one of them. The half-inch PVC sheet. I use that for a lot of sink molds that I make.
How are you joining
Like I
those?
said,
Like when you cut them, how do you stick them back together? Preferred method.
so I would. So when I build them for a sink mold, then you're 45, so you're mitering them together, and then you're rounding off your
Mm-hmm.
corners. You're rounding those off so that it pops out of the mold nice. Everything's drafted. Bondo, you use Bondo to fill any nicks and cracks and whatnot.
I fucking hate Bondo. I don't know what I'm doing wrong.
Love,
I cannot get it to cure ever.
not enough hardener.
I put so much hardener in it that it is like more red
But
than tan.
see, so then that might be another Portland thing, maybe. I don't know, because I know with the wrap, like if Bondo, I think if it gets the moisture too long, it might be a problem.
I wonder if that's it
So you
because
might
I'm
have to
like
put,
really humid here. Because like I'll put it out in
yeah,
the
you might
sun
have,
and it will still. I'll mix up the hardener with the Bondo, mix it up really really well quickly, and then put it in my spaces, fill up the gaps and all that kind of stuff. And I will put it out in the Florida sun and let it bake for 6 hours. Come back and it'll still be sticky.
hmm, yeah, you need a different Bondo. It's 30 minutes and I'm sanding.
I, I don't know. I guess I'll have to look something up because everybody mentions Bondo and I'm like, it doesn't work.
Yeah, no, my stuff works good. Yeah, so then we build our molds like that, then fill all the creases and nicks and dings with Bondo, sand it out nice, oil that thing up good, and then you get 20 casts out of it.
So are you when you say oil it up, are you putting like a wax or like a legitimate like coating over that? Because I know that some people, or maybe it's because you're using rapid set that it doesn't have time to adhere to the Bondo. Um, but like I've had where Bondo has come into contact with the concrete and it does one of two things: it either sticks like crazy or it discolors it.
Yeah, 100%. I don't have that issue. If I have Bondo, I oil it with Cretelise 20.
Hmm.
Um, and other than that, I never have it stick to my concrete or discolor it.
I wonder if that's because you're using rapid set because I've never used it with rapid set. Uh, so that might be it.
Yeah.
Uh,
And you got to make sure you oil it so it doesn't stick.
mhm.
But
Um, so PV sheets, Bondo. Is there any other material that is maybe like a little bit obscure that you like using or found to be incredibly useful?
um, well, like I like using laminate for radiuses, right? That's pretty big. My tables are all steel. I swear by steel tables.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, that's about the gist of it. Melamine, steel, laminate, and PVC sheets.
What are you using for? What is your mold release of choice on your steel tables?
880.
Okay.
Cretelise
What
880.
is your so when you pull your piece off, how are you treating the steel to make sure that it doesn't? I've never used steel. I'm just asking because I'm
Yeah,
assuming there are other people out there that might want to switch to that. What is the maintenance of those like? Because some people complain about it, and some people are like, it's easy.
yeah, it's super simple. You can be forming in about 45 minutes again, max. So you hot glue your forms to the steel, and then you oil your steel. You wipe off the excess oil. You do your pour. You come back the next day. You pop your molds off. You pop your forms off, or first you pop your forms off. You pop your molds off. The table's all wet from wet grinding.
Mm-hmm.
You take the majority of the junk off. I leave a bunch of sand on there. I throw my triple headed grinder on there with 50 grit, 50 or 100, and I spend about 15 minutes grinding it. And then I wash it off, squeegee the water off, and hit it with a little bit of xylene to take out any of the excess oil that's been left behind, and I'm forming again.
So,
It's,
so what if it's having to sit there for a little bit? Do you put anything?
try not to let it sit.
Okay.
Like,
So what about over
try and
like
get
the
the water
weekend,
out.
for example?
Yeah, I wouldn't leave it. I wouldn't leave water on an unoiled
So, so
um,
once you put the oil
piece.
on it, you just that can just be left like over the weekend, for example.
Somewhat, yeah. Like you're not going to leave standing water. We've had it where it does get a chance to rust over the weekend, but I mean, one grind and a pour, and then a grind and a pour, and you don't see it. Plus, if you're processing your pieces, that it won't ever come through.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a nice, fast, cheap um, substrate material to form on.
Yeah. I don't know that there's a. Yeah, I mean the guys that I know that use steel, they just swear by it. Um, you do have to have the space for it because it's not like you're breaking that table down and like moving it to the side though.
No, no, we got two tables. They're both 16 feet by 6 feet. Um, Back in the day, I thought it was smart to swap out sheets of steel on different sizes, but that was too much of a headache, and then your sheets end up bending and stuff like that. So I got lots of scrap steel at home.
Do you um so let's say that somebody is wanting to build a steel tabletop. What is the generic or maybe like these are the minimums that you need to have in order to even consider doing steel?
Like strength wise, you mean,
Mm-hmm.
or
Like how would they go about setting up that? Also with like space requirement because you aren't going to be able to
yeah,
move
well,
it.
they're gonna want to build like a real decent base, right? So I get all my bases, like my tables made at a local fab shop, so they're essentially like a big spine table, and then it's I think it's 3/16 sheet of steel that's down on that. Um, That's tack welded in a couple spots, I believe.
So you have somebody
And
metal
then,
fabricate the entire table.
yeah, the whole table was made.
So have
Yeah.
you done it where it hasn't been anything posted about this recently, but people will do like a wooden base, and then they'll put their steel right over the top of that. Did you avoid that for a particular reason? Have you done that in the past and find that you don't like it? Like, what was the
Uh,
mindset behind that?
no, I've only had one wood table, and that was in the first year doing it. After that, it's always been steel, and the main reason is because my steel tables have always had casters underneath, just for mobility, because I was always able to move everything around, and then they would be adjustable, so I could level everything out. Now that I got a bigger space, I have steel table. My two casting tables are permanent. They're set.
Mm-hmm.
They're 100%, so they don't get moved anymore. I just use steel because I wet grind, right? So there's a lot of mess and water, and it's good to go.
Yeah, there is something to be said. Like if you're using wood a lot and you are wet grinding the pieces, you do need to be mindful of that because depending on how wet some of that wood gets, you could end up getting like distortions in it, and you might not be able to use that 2x4, 2x6, 2 by whatever again just because it distorts so much. Um, are are you doing any SCC anything?
No,
No.
it's not. No, my machine is it's so fast, and I love how it lays it up in little tiny layers because that's my general belief is that when you're laying those fibers down in 1/8 layers, that's when they're working compared to when they're dumped in like a load of
Mm-hmm.
concrete.
Are you rolling
That's
between
just
layers or no?
nope, not nope. Because they're so tight, there's no point in rolling them.
Okay.
If it's a loose layer for some reason, like say I slump busted the crap out of it to get it to stand up, and then it might be a little bit of a looser spray up, then I'll roll it just to get any air out of it.
Mm-hmm.
But generally, no, it doesn't need to be rolled.
Um, okay, so then what if do you do bathtubs or no?
I've done a couple now, yeah.
Are you spraying those or how do you go about doing those?
Yeah, so I build a plug, like what you sit in,
Mm-hmm.
essentially,
Mm-hmm.
and then I spray my mist coat on that, and I work backwards from there, and then my last backer coat has no fibers again, and I have a jig set up around that mold with a screed, and so I actually spray up. Well, no, it's a little more complicated than that. Um, so I have my plug set, and then I have the thickness of the tub, whether it's going to be 2 inches or inch and a half or whatever you're going to have. I have a small little half-inch form set around the tub, 2 inches away from that. So I pour that layer first,
Mm-hmm.
and it's rapid set. So hour and a half later, that's hard. As I'm working backwards, I build out, and I have a screed jig on top or like above the tub, and that screed jig and that small half-inch form on the bottom is what I use to pull my screed on when I get to my last layer. So I've done my mist coat, I've done backer, 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 backer. Then I go to mist coat
Mm-hmm.
again, and I just spray that. I screed it wherever it's not touching, spray a bit more, screed it wherever it's not touching, spray a bit more.
Fascinating. Huh.
And then once that's hard, then I grind it all
Huh.
with hundreds. But
That's crafty. I've never heard of anybody doing like that before.
no, I just don't. Yeah, I don't know. I've never made a two-part mold. I've only just done the plug and worked backwards from that plug.
That's fascinating. I mean, as far as like making sure that your layers are all nice and flat as you're building up your backer and everything, I mean, that's genius. Because like when we did our bathtub, I mean, I basically sprayed both the outside and the inside, put the two pieces together. Huh. I mean, I wouldn't have been able to do it like you do because I don't have any way to spray the backer, but that's interesting. That's, there's some crafty people
Yeah,
out
and then
there.
that way, as you're building out your layers, you can really doctor your scrim, right? Like put it where it needs to go
Mm-hmm.
and stuff like that.
Huh. You're
Yeah.
one crafty man, sir.
I don't know. It's trial and error. It worked the first time and the second time. So.
Yeah. Nope, I'm not gonna ask that. That's so. Let's switch to more of the personal side of things. You mentioned that you really don't like working on weekends. Is there a specific reason for that? Like having, because I know you have a wife and kids.
Yeah, we got two kids.
Is that the primary reason for not weekends, or is it more like I just don't want to work 7 days a week?
Um, well, it's a little bit of everything. We go to church on Sundays, so we typically like to have just family days and Sundays.
Mm-hmm.
And then Saturdays, I don't want to. I want to work around the yard because I give my business during the week. I give my business to all pretty much. Um, so yeah, I got to spend time with the family on Saturdays and Sundays. And I see other guys out there, and I see them working away on a Saturday and a Sunday, and then Monday you're back at it again. It's like you got to give yourself some. You got to give your brain a break. You got to get away from it a bit. Otherwise, you're gonna get sick of it.
Mm-hmm.
In my opinion, I enjoy doing what I do, and I don't want to overdo it. Right? Like if you're doing it 7 days a week, and I don't know, that's just it's too much. Like you got to get away from it. Give you some headspace. Um, I work long days, so I probably get just as many hours. Like we'll start at 5 and we'll be done at 6 during the week. But and if I really have to, I'll go back after the kids are in bed. But yeah, I try not to work Saturdays and Sundays.
So, are there any like any what would be a good word for it? I can't even think of what it like methodologies is the thing that comes to mind. That's not the right word, but like how you approach like okay, business time is this, personal time is this. Are there any like mental frameworks that you use to decide what those times are? Like let's say that you're going through the week. Let's say it's a Tuesday and for whatever reason like you're just done for the day and it's at like 2. Do you call it quits or do you just kind of push through it?
Um, yeah, that kind of depends. Uh,
Because there is something to be said about like,
yeah, we're not rigid hours for sure. Not like we're not there from 8 till 5, and at 5 o'clock we drop the tools and we walk
mm-hmm,
away. If stuff's still got to be done, we're gonna stay. And if it's 2 o'clock and it's hot in the shop and the weather's nice, hey, let's go play around a golf kind of thing.
mm-hmm.
Um,
How do you decide that?
yeah, I'm not too.
How
Pardon
do you
me.
decide that? Yeah, because like it seems like the default for most people that, especially people who run their own business, is more, 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 more. Um, but I love that you brought up like that. Like there's a like you get to a certain point and you're just done, and anything past that is just like the law of diminishing returns, right? But how do you? Are there any signs that you look for that is like, no, I mean, we're done for the day. We'll go hang out. We'll get something, you know?
Yeah, I would say if you're not enjoying it anymore, right? Um, if you're not enjoying it and you're gonna start getting mistakes, then you're better off just walking away and coming at it fresh
Mm-hmm.
tomorrow. Um, you're better off to go play around the golf with the guys and everybody has a good time, and then they give it their all tomorrow when you're there for 12 or 14
Mm-hmm.
hours. They don't blink an eye because yesterday, whatever, you went and you had a good time, everybody recharged kind of thing. Um, yeah, if you're not feeling it, don't push through it, like, because you're just gonna make mistakes, and mistakes cost a lot of money.
Yeah. Can you, maybe it's not something you've thought about of like how to articulate, but like, like what do you mean when you say if you're not feeling it? Because like there's some people that just lack motivation, right? Or discipline or either. But like so there does need to be like there are some times where you just need to like suck it up, buttercup. You need to kind of push through it, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know how to explain that. Um,
Are there things that like you would recommend people look for to be able to tell the difference between the two? Because they're cousins, right? They're pretty close to each other, but knowing the difference between them
Yeah,
can be the difference between, like you mentioned, a really costly mistake, or just getting to the point where you're like, "Fuck this! I'm never doing this again."
yeah, but like, yeah, um, I don't know. It's that's kind of the whole. Oh, that's a real deep question. There's been days where you're kicking buckets out the door. You're
Oh
like,
yeah,
that's it, I'm done.
you walk by the shop and you see like a Home Depot orange bucket go flying out the door.
Yeah.
Fuck! Yeah, there are those
Yeah, so
days.
that would be one of those days where you're not feeling it. It's just better off to turn off the lights and come back
Mm-hmm.
later. But yeah, I mean, I think if you're doing this as a business and you're successful, then you obviously have the drive that it takes, and you know when you got to be there and when you got to be doing your stuff,
Mm-hmm.
because you wouldn't have made it that far. Because it takes a lot of drive, it takes a lot of patience, and you have to be ready to make mistakes and to fess up to those mistakes and then learn from them. Um, that's a pretty big thing.
How do you do that?
It's like, how do you learn
No,
from
how do
them?
you do that? Like when because there's two parts to that. There's the external facing part of like when you make a mistake. Um, like maybe that mistake affected someone else, a client, a coworker, uh, a spouse, and then you have that outward fessing up, but you also have the internal part, right? And some people have more negative self talk than others. Um, it's always you've always fascinated me with how like even keel you seem to be pretty much all the time. Like I really admire people that they take things in stride. So maybe you don't have that much of a the head garbage that comes along with that. But what does that look like when you fess up to external factors, and then what does it also look like on the inside when you're kind of talking to yourself about that?
Um, yeah, I think the big thing is admitting that you screwed up yourself, instead of trying to blame it on all the different things that could have went wrong. Ultimately, you made the mistake, whatever it would be. So I think that's a pretty big thing. Whereas if you're always trying to blame everybody else for something that went wrong, you're not going to learn from that. Whereas if you know you screwed up, so this is what you got to do next time.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's pretty big, um, and not to get too worked up about things that are out of your control. Um, Trying to think of some examples right now, but I can't. But
Well, has that is that something that comes naturally to you? Like, are you naturally an even keel person, or is it something that
I
you've worked
I
at?
think so. No, I think so. Yeah, I
Lucky.
yeah, I think I'm fairly level, fairly level-headed. I got a temper here and there, but I'll usually keep that to myself to throw buckets at the wall. Kind of
Many buckets have been sacrificed to the anger.
yeah, but yeah, no, I mean, it's like a little while ago we had a job that didn't turn out. It was big, huge island, and it was half an inch too small
Ooh.
for the cabinetry,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a big island. It was a lot of work. It was white, and I just stood there and looked at it for a second. I was like, yeah, I didn't form it, but I should have checked it.
Mm-hmm.
I should have double checked it. So it's nobody else's fault but my own for not doing that tiny little pull the tape measure over it one more time kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no point in losing your shit at your guys or whatever else, because ultimately it was your mistake for not doing the final check kind of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So from now on, you always check every piece, no matter how obvious it is. It's got to be checked.
Do you have a checklist or anything that like you and the guys go through, or is it just where you've just done it so many times you just
Yeah, no, we've started using clipboards. So we put the drawings on the clipboard, and the clipboard comes out and it goes with the piece,
Mm-hmm.
and then it gets hung back up on the wall when it's messy, and then when it's not messy, it comes back out again. So definitely, yeah, learn that way a bit.
Do you time track
Keep
those
the
things or no?
no, I'm terrible with timetables.
Okay, yeah. It seems to be a hit or
Yeah,
miss on whether guys like using that or not. It seems like
I don't even have I don't even have a schedule.
oh, so you're flying by the seat of
Everything's
your
up in my
pants.
head.
Well, you're also using rapid set, so it's I mean like that's a big difference between rapid set shops and like Portland shops. Like those timelines are just different. You have to have more planning. I think. I think that could be wrong.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm terrible for that. Like if I ever hire another person, that's gonna be the person that plans the stuff because I can't.
um, so does that lack of planning bleed over into other areas of life? Like, because you are pretty good about keeping Saturdays and Sundays to yourself, and maybe that's just a little bit more where it's like a hard line, like these are these days and these are other days. Does that end up affecting like when it's time to go home for the day, like sticking with that and or not
Yeah,
really?
so I guess that's where I'll take the punishment of the poor planning is I'll still go home, have dinner with the family, put the kids to bed, but then I'm going back to the shop till 1 or 2 in the morning because I screwed up on my planning. I gotta
Mm.
catch up now.
Um,
So
feel free to not answer this. This might get a little too personal, but does that end up causing like any problems with like the home life, for example, like having to go back? Because you mentioned like where like Monday through Friday can sometimes can be pretty beastly of days. Cause cause conflict, or is it where some people have just done a really good job with like their spouses where like these are the priorities these days of the week, and sometimes it may eat into other areas. Is it one of those things, or um is it just kind of understood? I might be like bleeding this out a little bit too far, but does that make sense?
yeah, no, yeah, our my schedule always has been pretty packed that way during the week, so my wife kind of knows what to expect. But then at the same time, we do take a lot of little micro holidays. Like we'll work our butt off like crazy for a month straight,
Mm-hmm.
and then we'll zip off for 2 nights, whether it be with the kids or without, and just kind of go get your headspace, go get it figured out, go out for a couple drinks, nice dinner, spend the night away from home, and then and just do a couple of those
Mm.
a year. Like I don't know, 3, 4 a year even,
Mm-hmm.
and just a little micro holiday. Get out, and it's just phones off and time to recharge and stuff. And then it kind of makes up for when you're there at 2 o'clock in the morning working away.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, yeah, this is hectic right now, but once this job's installed, then I'm gonna have a little bit of time to get out of here.
Do you do you plan? Oh, do you plan those? Yeah. Do you? Is it one of those things where you just kind of keep it in the back of your mind and it's like, okay, it's time to go do one of those, or is it like, do you plan them out ahead of time, or maybe it's the wife that plan those out ahead of time?
Yeah, no, they're not too planned. Some are, some aren't. And honestly, quite often they're free because you got to spend a lot of money on credit cards, so you might as well get a credit card with good rewards, and then those rewards you use for hotels or
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. So
Do you do you make a point to do so you have the micro vacations that you do throughout the year? Do you have like do you do longer ones that you plan out, or is that just when the time becomes available for those?
yeah, this year we did 2 weeks straight in a row. It's the first time ever. Um, well, not the first time ever, but the first time in a long time that I took 2 full weeks off back to back. That was pretty hard on the schedule, but that was pre-planned. Tried to work around it, but it still
Mm-hmm.
screws up the schedule pretty good if
Yeah.
you go 2 weeks back to back.
Is there, if somebody was going to start doing um they were going to try and schedule those into their life or whatever, like the longer vacations, is there anything that you would recommend on the front end that they should be mindful of? Like you need to make sure that you, I don't know, is there anything that you would make sure to tell someone, like if you do want to take these times off, and you should, this is how you should maybe approach it?
The problem with the long holidays is that you are so bent out of shape to get done before you go, it's hardly worth going. And then when you get back, you're so bent out of shape to get caught up again. That's why I really like those little micro 1 or 2 nights
Mm-hmm.
kind of things. It's there, but it doesn't destroy your schedule. Where if you're gone for 2 weeks, your schedule is destroyed.
Well,
Like
okay, so
unless you've really worked it into it, but it's pretty hard in my area, anyways. It's pretty hard to like if somebody calls me like, yeah, the kitchen's ready for template, I can't be like, well, sorry, I'm not going to be there for 4 weeks, right? You can't, or I don't think you can do that anyways. Like you got to be there within the next week or so to template that kitchen so that within the next 3 to 4 weeks you can install. You can't, I don't know.
yeah, that would be interesting to talk with somebody that is like really good at planning. Cause this is
Yeah.
something that I just talked with Caleb Lawson about. He's like, they're gonna start just taking, crap, I'm not remembering. I think he's taking like the full month of like December off, and so that'll be something. Maybe I'll ask him, and then you can listen to that and see if there's something that you need, because
Yeah.
he's really good at planning. Uh, So maybe that's something to ask him about is that, because like you don't want it to get like, the micro vacations are great, but you do need, some people need those longer unplug times, but you don't want to just like destroy that time, right, with like the stress that's on the front end and then the stress that's on the tail end. Um, well, maybe looking at it where you see the parts that kind of just go crazy, with like the problem sides of that. Are there any things that, knowing the problems that are associated with that, where you could kind of head those off in the past?
Um,
And maybe that's just like, with your personality doesn't really jive with those things, so you're not able to see the
no,
solution. But
I think that's probably it. Yeah.
yeah, because that would be something interesting to find, um, because you already know the problem. The problem is like, it's hard to kind of get ready to leave, and it's kind of hard to come back because everything piles up. But you do need that time, right? That's something interesting to try and figure out. There's got to be a solution. Maybe.
Yeah. Probably just a better schedule. More spaced out.
Well, how many people do you have that you? So it's you and how many guys on a consistent basis?
One.
One. Okay. And
Yeah, he's been with me for 6 years.
how do you flex to do those bigger, like when you need more people, like when you need additional people? Is that something that you connect with the GC about?
Yeah, a little bit. Otherwise, um, I do have a pretty deep friend group, I guess, in the construction world, so I can pull here and there. These guys will come out for a day or something.
So throughout the week, it's just you and one other guy that's consistently there. So, kind of getting to the end of the day and kind of like, let's just go, is a little bit easier, as opposed to a shop that's got like, I don't know, maybe 10 people or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Um, I don't know. I mean, this is a bit of an abrupt stop, but I mean, I think that's probably a good place to stop.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
A man of few
So I
words.
gotta.
Thanks everyone who made it all the way to the end. I know the episode was a little bit longer, but I hope you were able to get something out of it. If you do have some extra time, a review would be incredibly helpful. It is one of the only ways that this podcast can get discovered, and we're not sponsored in any way, so it would really, really help. If you happen to use any of the affiliate links in the show notes, we may or may not get a commission based on if you buy anything. It's a really easy, no cost to you way of supporting this channel if you do find that it's helpful in any way. Again, if you want to leave us some recommendations of people who to talk to or content that you'd like to hear about, the best way to do that would be to leave that in the comments on our YouTube channel. Thanks again, and I really appreciate your time.